Welcome back to CIBC Presents Entrepreneurship 101. Glad to see you all here. I'm going to start off with a few questions because that's going to help me understand the audience a little better and help me tailor the talk a little bit. How many of you here are not associated in some way with a university or a research hospital? Put up your hands. Okay, fair number of you. Bear with us for this lecture and the next topic lecture. The lecture following this one is a lives lived lecture, or a lived it lecture. The one after that and this one are focused a little bit more on what it's like taking a technology out of a research institution. But I'm going to try and make certain that there is a lot of content that's very generally relevant. There's just a few specific things that these lectures were customized for folks coming out of a research institution. Second question, how many of you here either have or want to start your own company? Yes, good. I confess I gave a lecture very similar to this one the other day to a group of postdocs. And when I asked that question, everybody just sort of sat like this. So that's a real tough audience when your whole talk is focused on about how to start a company. Let's get rolling then. Business development and entrepreneurship basics. What I want to cover in this lecture is some thoughts about different types of businesses that you could start, and talk about what are the requirements, what are the cash requirements, and how do you find money to fund different businesses. Really just touch on a lot of topics that we will ultimately spend quite a bit more time on and have some special lectures on, but this is a way of covering a fair amount of territory in one lecture to get things rolling. Okay, and we're going to cover four basic questions. What does my business look like? What resources do I need? How do I fit into the rest of the world? And what is my business model? And this one, I always say this is an important one to cover. As you know, if you've seen my background, I was a partner in a venture capital fund for a while, and one of the investors in that company, he said, the world works. Now, he had a few $100 million, so I guess for him it did. But his point was well taken. The world gets by, as it is right now, and you're coming in with a business idea. You have to fit yourself into a world that is getting by and has all sorts, it's an ecosystem. There are all sorts of relationships out there. You've got to carve a place out for yourself. So you really need to understand what that is. And that drives a lot of the thinking on these other questions. So, okay, this is one way of looking at the ecosystem. And this is one of those slides that is tailored a little bit to academic institutions. Because those of you who are up here in universities and hospital labs, your job right now is really creating knowledge. Some of that knowledge can be novel, useful, and non-obvious, which means it can be patented. You can then, and if we say, so that's the academic world, and then down here is, I'm not going to use the term the real world, it's the rest of the world. And that has companies that are taking ideas from a concept to an R&D project, engineering it into products or services, going into production and selling into the marketplace. There are lots of ways, if you are coming from this community, to build a company that works with this community. And the first thing I want to talk about now is some of the different ways of doing that. The first one is setting up a consulting business. And okay, Next question. How many of you here are thinking of getting into business as a consultant? Okay, fair number of you. Simple definition. You've got some particular expertise, specialized expertise generally, and you're going to take that to that marketplace. So, you know, if we go back to our basic model, you're not running all the way down this process here, but instead you're sitting here and you're maybe advising. If it's science-based or engineering-based, you're advising on product development. You're giving your expertise as to how this can take place. Anybody here from business schools? Okay. You may, in fact, have advice to give on sales. I'm assuming that the chemists are not doing that. I certainly couldn't. But you may bring business expertise. Okay, so what are some of the characteristics of consulting companies? The beauty of a consulting company is you can be a one-person company. You can start as a one-person company. Your capital costs, your resources that you need can actually be very low. You need a laptop, you know, you need a room in your basement, you need some place to hang out a shingle, you need some business cards, and you can do what a lot of people do, set yourself up in business and a consultant. Now, there are large consulting firms. There are large environmental consulting firms, engineering consulting firms. But it's one business that you can start very simply with relatively low capital cost and then grow it organically by bootstrapping. As I say, you can have a technical, lots of management consultants out there, too many, and you could have a marketing focus, okay? One of the key things that I see a lot of consultants doing now is operating as a virtual network. This allows you to go in and, you know, you approach a client and you say, well, I'm offering particular expertise in this. And they say, well, that's good, but I also need some help in something else. You don't want to say, well, you know, I don't really do that, so I can't help you there. If you form a network with people who offer different services, and you can hang a name around that. It can have a name. In reality, it's just a group of individuals who are teamed up as a virtual network. But now you go into a client and say, I have a partner who can provide that service to you. We can address all of your needs. And there are arrangements whereby you bring something in and someone else participates, you get a cut, and, you know, you share revenues around. But it means you can operate just as you, but to the world, you offer a full spectrum of services. And you may jointly put out a brochure that lists all these different services. And someone looking at it think, wow, this is a 12-person company. Wow, you know, all sorts of things. In reality, it's just a virtual network. And obviously with you know, communications and that today, there's absolutely no necessity that you all show up for work in the same place. So keep that in mind, those of you who are starting out as a consulting company, that there is power in working in groups. There's a strong marketing advantage if you go out there offering multiple functions instead of just one unique thing. Okay, question I frequently get asked, how much should I charge? And the flip answer is, how much have they got? It's a little more complicated than that. There's one simple approach. You can say, well, I charge $1,000 a day. That's my fee. And, you know, this job will take 10 days, so it'll cost you $10,000. That's perfectly reasonable. That's, you know, simple. Another way to look at it, though, my concern there, as a business person, you may be leaving some money on the table. Better thing to look at is, what's the alternative cost to them? Obvious alternative cost is they could hire you as a full-time employee or someone like you with that skill set. But you look at that and you say, okay, that's a commitment. That's going to cost, you know, fully loaded with salaries, benefits, management overhead and all that, $200,000 a year. Okay? Now the question, how many billable days are there in a year? There are 200. If you assume you want to take a 3-week vacation and you don't want to work on statutory holidays, there are 236 billable days in a year. Okay? Which is why $1,000 a day works out reasonably well, because that's about 200 and some odd thousand is carrying costs for a professional, give or take a little bit. So, wow, if they had to hire somebody for a year, it's going to cost them $200,000. You're only going to work on it for a month. Okay, but you can't hire people for only a month. So you look at their alternative cost, cut them a little bit of slack on that, that's what you charge. Because they can't beat your price by an alternative mechanism. And if that works out at more than $1,000 a day or $1,500 a day, it's win-win. You go home to your spouse and you're bringing home more money. They're saving money over what the alternative would have cost them. And that's a good business deal. So don't simply think that I'm worth X dollars a day, therefore that's what I charge. Look at the value proposition that you're bringing to them, and then see what you can negotiate. Just a thought. Think of it as a business and what you're offering the customer. Not, well, I'm just X dollars an hour sort of thing. And never get yourself onto an hourly rate, because you will work way more time than you bill. I know no consultant that bills for their full hours except lawyers. Any lawyers here? And that's done to the 10-minute increment. Most consultants spend way more time that they don't bill for. Well, I had to do some reading and some background materials. I can't really charge for that. We're all scientists and engineers, and we're bashful about charging for time. Again, think about the value that they bring and the alternative cost, and don't be bashful about charging. You will probably only be able to bill out 50% of your time. If you're in business as a consultant, you know, if you can, you get someone to pay you to go to a conference. If they won't pay you, you need to be going to the key information sources, and whether they're trade shows or academic conferences, you will pay for that yourself, and that's not billable time. So don't think, oh, there are 236 days, gee, $1,000 a day, I make $236,000. You could be lucky to make a half of that, because there's a huge overhead of just keeping yourself in the game. And writing proposals. You can't bill for writing proposals. So there's a lot of non-billable time in there. Okay, that's a brief talk about consulting. Now, services. You provide a service to existing businesses, and again, within our model, you're not down here creating new products and that. You're sitting outside. Maybe at the university, you're going to gain access to a lab that you're working in, and you'll provide services down into this community. Now, how many people here want to create a services type company? Okay, got a handful. Some of the characteristics. There's a lot of technical services businesses. There's a lot of analytical services, a lot on the life sciences, clinical, custom clinical trials, things like that. One of the challenges of a service business is that your capital costs can be quite high. If you're going to run an analytical lab, you're going to buy all of that equipment. And yet your return on that will not be high enough to attract the sort of investment capital, and we'll get onto that a little later in the lecture. So that's why I meet people from universities who say, there's equipment sitting idle in the lab, and I'm constantly getting other researchers coming and saying, Can I use that equipment, or will you run a sample for me? So maybe I can set up a business. I'll pay the institution for access to that equipment, a fair dollar, and I'll be the intermediary that provides that service out to the rest of the community. That can be a great model, okay? Nothing wrong with that. Because what that means is that you don't have the capital costs associated with setting yourself up. Yeah, classic service provider is IT service provider. And everybody out there has someone who provides IT services for them. It can be a very profitable business. Can be very small or very large. Hard to generalize about this type of business. The last one that I want to cover is what I call a product business. You're going to make something. You have a real article. It could be a pharmaceutical compound. It could be a medical device. It could be a new cell phone. But you're going to make something, and you're going to take it to the marketplace. So in that case, you're joining this list of companies here, and you're going to go down this pathway. You've got an idea. You've got to take it from concept to an engineering prototype. You're going to go into production and start selling it. So you're really putting yourself right in this milieu here. How many of you here want to create a product company? Okay, brave souls. What are some of the characteristics? You know, it can be a cottage industry. You can handcraft widgets and sell them. That's a product company. Okay? This is an old slide. I shouldn't really use General Motors anymore. RIM, or at least Toyota, would be a better choice of example to use. The capital needs can vary widely, but generally, if you're going into business to make something and sell it, you're going to need capital. Okay? You're going to need money somehow to make this business grow. It's just a matter of how much and over what period of time and how you're going to use it. And that's one of the challenges of a product business. As opposed to a consulting business where I said, you know, with a fairly low investment, you can get out there and start earning money. If you've got an idea for a new widget, you've got prototyping and all sorts of costs that you will incur before you get $1 in revenue. And that's a challenge. But it's an addressable challenge. And one thing, you need to think a little bit about, what are you looking for in your company? And this is a question that's actually valid for any type of business that you might be starting. And I call it the Mercedes in the driveway versus high growth. Mercedes in the driveway, you know, I got a good company. I got 6 guys working for me, reasonable revenue, enough revenue that I trade in my Mercedes every year and get a new Mercedes. Get a lot of golf in over the summer. Life is good. I have no ambitions to grow this, and there's a lot of, you know, this is not intended to be critical. I'm envious. There's a lot of good businesses out there that operate that way. A business like that will not attract a venture capitalist. I state that flat out. A venture capitalist is only interested in an ultra high growth company, Skype, something like that, that's going to be $2 billion in 4 years. Okay? So you need to have in your head an understanding of what you want your life to look like, because that will influence who you can talk to partner with and work with in your business. So, you know, that's the first, and only you can answer that question. So that's I'll lay that out there. Now, how do you finance a business? And this is applicable to really to any type of business, but particularly relevant for a product business. There's a real distinction between debt and equity. Debt, you borrow money from somebody. You generally have to provide some security. And you will have to repay that over some fixed period of time. There'll be interest. We're all familiar with mortgages and borrowing for cars. Equity is very different. You sell a piece of the action. Somebody buys a percentage of your venture. They only get that money back if that venture succeeds. So if they buy half of your venture and you spend all of that money and nothing happens, then you have no obligation to pay that back. It's gone and they've lost it. If your business becomes worth $100 million, they get 50% of that when you sell it. You have a partner, okay? This is marriage. And it's very different from debt, okay? And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. Last one here is bootstrapping, and that says, it's very simple. You basically fund yourself, you get started, you get a contract, you make a little bit of money out of that contract, that allows you to grow, get your next contract, make a little bit more money on that, make enough money you can actually hire somebody, and you slowly grow the company step by step. Very valid. Lots of companies do that. But I suggest to you, if the business that you're in is, let's say, I don't know, cameras for cell phones. Okay, you know what the life cycle of a new technology is in there? It's probably about 4 months before it's displaced by the next one. And the next one. It's a very rapidly evolving technology market. If your plan says, well, I'll grow slowly, you will be left so far behind that your hot idea is yesterday's news 2 years from now. So there are some models where the only way to get in there is get enough capital, get in, hit it hard, move quickly, get out there first, and capture the market. And if you can't do that, then it's not even worth trying, because the market will overtake you. Other markets are much more slow to evolve and are suitable to this. So again, different methods work for different types of companies. Now, I'm going to want to emphasize the difference between debt and equity, and I use the lemonade stand example. You're 8 years old and you want to set up a lemonade stand, and you need 20 bucks to buy lemons. Okay? Your big sister is willing to bankroll you. And she's got two choices. She can lend you 20 bucks, or she can come in as a 50-50 partner. And you know, this, you can look at the slides online, but I've looked at 3 scenarios. It's rainy, it's cloudy, or it's sunny and hot. Point here, with debt, if you have a lousy day, okay, it's 20 bucks, or sorry, 10 bucks you took in, it all goes back to the lender. You as the entrepreneur get nothing. Cloudy day, okay, lender gets their 20 bucks back, so they're even, and you get 10. 50 bucks, sunny, hot day, the lender doesn't get above even. Best they do is get their money back. And obviously, this is a zeroth order approximation, there's interest and all that. But fundamentally, the lender caps out getting their money back and a little bit of return on there. But their risk is relatively low. A partner, on the other hand, if it's rainy, they lose 15 bucks as opposed to 10. And here, you at least get something with your partner as opposed to having a lender. If we get down here, finally the partner starts making money as opposed to a lender who had only been even, and you do really well in this scenario. Point is, debt is lower risk, lower reward. An equity investment is basically a higher risk because you can lose everything, but it is potentially a higher reward. So that's the fundamental difference between debt and equity investment. As you might expect, you get different types of folks comfortable with levels of risk, and they behave differently. If you have a partner and it's raining, and you don't really want to go out, because what's the point? Your sister is going to say, get your tail out there. My money's at risk here. I want you out there trying to sell. That's what financial partners tend to do. I'm trivializing it with the example. A financial partner says, my money's completely at risk. You're going to do everything possible to sell. You know, we're going, and not only that, but I will have a say in your business. A lender tends not to have a lot of say. A lender has a security, has an asset, but they don't get to tell you how to run your business because they're not really your partner. And that's a substantial difference. When you take on an equity partner, it is truly expected to be a partnership. And you often have a tension that you have technical knowledge and they've got money, and you can have, they don't understand what you're doing for technical reasons, and you don't understand why they're worried about the money. You have dissimilar languages, and there's scope there for all sorts of challenges. But it's sometimes, it's often the only way to move things ahead. So, where can you get debt financing? First choice is your mortgage or your credit cards. And the stories are legion of entrepreneurs who have maxed out their 3 credit cards, their $50,000 in debt, just before they sign the big deal that makes them millionaires. Okay? Lots of stories about that. First source of debt financing is you. If again, most of you are young, if you don't have assets, but if you got a house, you're going to be prepared to mortgage it and use that to finance your business. This is high risk. There's the 3 F's: friends, family, and fools. And the first 2 are often called love money. But again, if you come to me as a friend and say, you know, would you lend me some money for this venture? I'm going to ask you, how much have you put up? You know, are you mortgaging your house? You know, why should I, you know, potentially mortgage mine to raise some capital to lend to you if you're not willing to do the same? If you don't have the confidence to do that yourself, why should I? Perfectly valid question. So again, it will come back to you. You know, do you have enough confidence to take the risk that you're asking me to take by providing you with money? Banks. Banks get a lot of criticism. Well, some of it fair, but a lot of it unfair. It is not their job to finance your dreams and take risks. And obviously in today's market, you can be absolutely, you know, think of yourself with money on deposit in a bank. Do you want them risking it on some harebrained scheme with the person sitting next to you? No, you want them to protect your money. And that in fact, again, at times like this, is one of the strengths of the Canadian banking system, and I think we should be quite thankful for it. But they will lend money to businesses. They will lend against receivables. They won't lend against a patent. You can't put a value on a patent. You may think it will launch a billion-dollar company. To them, it could be worthless. So they're not going to lend against that. They'll lend against an asset. They'll lend against your house, your mortgage. That they can do quite comfortably. So what banks are more relevant when you're actually selling product and you've got revenues, then they can lend against receivables. Only up to a certain percent, but that's when you get into operating financing, and that's, you know, beyond what I want to get into today, because that's way downstream for where most of you folks are right now. And venture debt funds are a particular type of fund that lends money to companies that are also getting equity. So that leads into the next topic, equity. So again, friends, family, and fools. Classic case of this, and it's apocryphal, is Trivial Pursuits. The guys there literally were hitting up their families. They were in bars hitting up people, some of whom were actually dumb enough to invest a few $1,000s. And I say dumb with quotes on it because most of them made millions of dollars based on those investments. So never ignore the fools. Those are folks who, well, sure, I'll put something behind it, and it can pay off handsomely. But again, same questions. If I'm a friend and you're asking me to invest in your company and you'll give me stock in that company, I'm going to sit there and say, you know, have you taken everything you can out of the bank to bankroll this? I want to be sure that you're really committed. Angels, sometimes prefer to be known as high net worth individuals, rich folks. Typical angel is someone who has made money in business, sold their business, semi-retired, but wants to keep a hand in business. They will typically invest in a space that they understand. So, back in the days when Nortel was worth north of $200 a share, there were lots of Nortel executives who cashed out and retired with millions of dollars, and so they looked for telecom companies. They knew the space cold, they knew where the needs were. You come in with a great idea for something that plays in telecom, yeah, they'll bankroll you. What's more important, not only will they bankroll you, but they'll come in and they'll work with you. And that experience that a good angel brings. So when you look for money, particularly equity financing, as I said, you're bringing on a partner, you want smart money. You don't want dumb money. And with all respects to Uncle Fred, who's a real estate lawyer, his money is good, but his help to you in launching your pharma company is relatively limited. Okay? You're better to get a pharma exec who's cashed out of their company, who can bring some real value to the table. So you're always looking not only for money, but for smart money. Yeah, that's the valuable hands-on experience. There is a web link to an angel investor. There is a National Association of Angels. They're organized angels here in Canada. Maple Leaf Angels. Angels, a little bit like cats, they're tough to herd. You find angels by talking with a lawyer who knows someone who is looking to lay some money out on some good investments, or an accountant. You know, there's not organized lists of angels. They, not surprisingly, being rich folks, they don't like to put their name out saying, come and see me if you want money. So they tend to stay under the radar. There are angel organizations that hold breakfasts or lunches, and they will bring together 40 or 50 angels, and if you can get on their agenda, then you get to do a 10-minute pitch to the group of angels. And then it's left up to the individuals to follow up with you. If they liked your teaser, then they'll follow up and they'll see if they want to invest. Venture capital funds. The venture capital model is a very well-defined model. Capital pools are brought together, typically for a limited period of time, for 10 years. There is a manager who's in charge of that pool of capital, and this can be $100 million or $2 billion pools of capital. The manager's job is to invest that capital in opportunities, investing over, say, the first 4 years of the fund, growing, helping those companies they've invested in grow, and then, say, for another 4 years, and in the last 2 or 3 years of the fund, harvest, sell, and at the end of 10 years, all of the proceeds return back to the investors in the fund. Okay? If your aim in creating your company is to have a lifetime job with your company, and you want to grow it, but you never want to sell it, then venture capital will not work for you. VCs invest, grow, exit. If they can't exit, then they're not interested in the play. And one of the first things they will ask if you pitch them is, what's your exit model? And classic exit model, oh, we'll take it public. Well, that doesn't happen anymore in today's market. It used to be valid, but sadly today it's not. So that generally means you will be acquired by some bigger company, hopefully for a very large price. But as I say, if your dream is running this company for the rest of your life, you're not likely to be compatible with a venture fund. And not all venture funds are the same. There are some funds that specialize in one discipline or another. There are some funds that work on really early stage companies, some that only won't touch you unless you've got at least $5 million worth of revenues. So my advice, if you're thinking about a venture fund, do your homework, and there is lots of information on funds. Every fund will have a website, and they'll tell you what they're looking for, where they play, what turns them on. Don't waste your time pitching somebody in IT if you've got a pharma compound, because they just don't play there, they don't understand the space, and it doesn't matter how good your idea is, they won't invest. Okay, and we will have some lectures in the spring, getting in more detail about how to pitch and how to deal with different types of venture funds. So some special financing sources, and now this tracks back to, again, particularly to those associated with universities and hospitals. There's government funding that will help you take an idea and do a proof of principle project that takes that lab prototype and mocks up something that's much more like a real world product. Okay? And that's basically through NSERC and CIHR, the I2I program and the POP, Proof of Principle program. They only fund academic labs. So you have to be working with somebody who has an academic affiliation. So that's not an avenue that's open to private sector. The avenue that's open to private sector is IRAP, Industrial Research Assistance Program, which is run by National Research Council. And these folks here do fund private companies in development projects, but you have to come up with at least half of the money yourself. But they will get there halfway there. And you can go to their, I've linked the websites here, you can go and you can check out these different programs, or if you've got any questions, send a question to the Entrepreneurship 101 at marsdd.com, and we can send you links and connect you with folks. Okay, talk a little bit about the financing life cycle, because this is really, again, here's that axis of going from concept to startup to growth to expansion. As you move down that pathway, basically what you're doing is managing risk. When you start out, it's a real risky business, and you're somewhere off the scale. And as your company grows, you're basically de-risking your opportunity. Now, it takes money to make that happen. It starts out low, and again, those of you who are in the lab, I can tell you, for $1 that you spend in the lab, you will spend $10 in actually getting it to a product, and you'll spend $100 getting out to the marketplace. So the amount of investment takes off like this. So you can start out with grants, then you move to angels, and they play in this space, concepts to startup. Then there are early stage venture funds, seed funds, that will take you through the startup growth phase, and then more conventional venture capital. Once you've started to get, here's the sales, right? You burn a lot of money before you get any sales. As you start to get sales, it gets easier to raise money because you know, your risk is way down. A, it works. B, customers like it. Now it's a much less risky investment, but more costly because the value of your company has gone up as its risk goes down here. Okay, this is the theory. I can tell you as an investor, what typically happens is that. That makes investors really uncomfortable because the investment, the investment dollars haven't shrunk, but, well, we had delays in getting the product to the marketplace, technical challenges, and it's been harder to get sales traction, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. What's a much more virtuous combination, if that's what it's going to look like, then you're better to bootstrap. And this is basically a bootstrap model that, you need some seed capital to get you going, but as soon as you get sales, you plow them back in as the investment, and your sales grow more in track with investments. Okay? As I said, be cautious there, because sometimes, and I think I can make this go back, sometimes the only way to have a chance of competing in the marketplace is to get a lot of capital and really get out there aggressively. And I need to go back one more. Get out there, both build the product, get an aggressive sales team, and get out into the marketplace. Okay, last part of the lecture. What do financing sources look for? Well, remember I said this is all about managing risk and lowering risk. So typically what we say is, okay, it's technology risk. These are technology-based companies, so obviously we've got technology risk there. And so we can look at some of the types of technology risk. What's the stage of development? Is it just an idea? Has it at least been proven in the lab? Have you made something that looks like a real-world prototype? And what are the scaling issues? What's the impact of this technology? Is this just sort of completely revolutionary, or is this it's sort of like what's out there, but it's better? And my advice there is, if you can't be 100% better or a tenth of the cost, it's not worth it. If you say, I can offer something that is a 15% improvement over what's out there, it will get no traction. It's not worth anybody's job to take a risk on something new with an unproven technology and an unproven company if the gain is about 15%. It just won't get the traction. And they also know something else will replace it 6 months from now that will give them something more. So you really have to have something that is dramatically better to make that rest of the world that's sitting out there. Like I said before, the world works, it's coping. You really have to give them something of real value to get them to sit up and pay attention. What's the competition? Yeah, as I said, is it disruptive? Does it rely on infrastructure? All sorts of technical factors. Okay, that's fine. And those of us with technical backgrounds sort of sit there and say, well, okay, well, that's it, right? I mean, this is how you base a decision on whether it's a good idea or not. Is the technology good? It would be nice if life were that simple, but the reality is there are at least 4 areas of risk that you have to consider. And I say technology risk is, does it work? Fundamentally, can you make your idea work? IP risk, okay, you can make it work, but can you protect it? Can you stop other people from doing it? Because if you can't stop other people from doing it, then the guys that are out there already will say, thank you, that's a clever idea, we'll do that. And don't believe first mover advantage. Microsoft was not the first, nor the best, but they were the best salespeople, and they steamrolled the folks who were out there first. So if you don't have something that is protectable, then you've got a real challenge. And okay, there are some businesses that you can run without a technology advantage, but it's a real challenge, and you better be fast and really own that marketplace before you get before the competition wakes up. So, does it work? Can you protect it? Next question. Does anybody care? There are tons of products, and some of them come from entrepreneurs, some of them come from big companies. They make it, and it gets to the marketplace, and frankly, there's no real demand for it. So one of the things I ask people, everybody says, oh, I've got my idea, I need to patent it. No, you need to find out if anybody cares before you even risk the money patenting it. Why spend $10,000 on a patent that you can, I mean, you can frame them, they look very nice on the wall, and your mother will be proud of you. But if the market doesn't care, why bother doing it as a business person? So you need to understand all sorts of factors about the market risk. And there, you know, there's competition, distribution channels. And I give the example, you got an idea for a new coating for scalpels, okay? Stay sharper longer, more corrosion resistant in the sterilization process. So that's simple, I can make that, I can sell them, right? Then you go to a hospital and you discover actually Baxter Healthcare has a 2-year contract with the hospital to provide them with all of their surgical supplies. So while we may all agree that your product is better, that supply chain, it's locked up for at least 2 years. And in fact, it may be a multi-institution, long-term contract. So your route to the marketplace is blocked by this giant that is sitting there. And you have no way to get around them. Cases like that, you can say the only, you know, okay, so the smart way to the marketplace is your customer is not the hospital, your customer is Baxter Healthcare. And you do a deal with them. So this is all market risk that you have to understand. So, get down to the final point. It works, you can protect it, the market does care. Key question that anybody who's going to invest in you is going to ask, can you do it? Do they have faith that you can actually execute? Do you have the skills? Do you have the skills to make it work, protect it? Do you have the skills to talk to the marketplace and engage? Can you sell? Not many engineers can sell, even fewer chemists. We're too honest. You know, well, there are some flaws. It's not quite that good. No. It's the greatest thing since sliced bread. You know, just sign up. You know, don't be shy. It's time to buy. And all that good stuff. So, do you have the skills to actually deliver? Most investors will tell you they will take a first-rate team with an okay technology over a mediocre team with a dynamite technology any day, because it all depends on execution. So it's not just about the technology. It's about all those other factors. And so as I said at the beginning, this is a bit of a setup lecture, because we're going to spend some time talking about how you understand markets and how you get the understanding about whether anybody cares. We're going to talk about building teams. And, you know, I had a prof come seeking funding once. He had a rather esoteric photon technology. And he had a business plan, and the first 6 hires were all going to be physicists. Well, that was his comfort zone. He was going to hire lots of physicists with whom he could talk physics. And we said, when are you going to hire a salesman? When are you going to hire somebody who will actually get out here? And he was all focused on doing this, with no thought to any of these other things. So where we want to get you is to a stage where you are comfortable in dealing with all of these issues. Okay? And I think I'm not going to go through these details. You can look at these online. We've listed, you know, checkpoints under intellectual property. What's the nature? What's the scope? How broad is the invention? Freedom to operate. What's competitive? What's going out there? Those of you in academia, prior disclosures, you know, please file your patent application before you go to the conference and blab all about your great idea. And And again, we've got a lecture on that topic. Market risks, the size, the dynamics, routes to market, that elephant that's blocking your way. What are the nature of the customers? Again, another just sidebar example. There was legislation introduced in the 90s about banning CFCs. You'd all remember that, okay? Two major industry groups affected. One was the electronics industry, where the CFCs were used as solvents, degreasing solvents. And the other was the auto industry, where they're used in air conditioners, okay? The response of the electronics industry was say, okay, got to do this. I mean, we're used to Moore's Law. We're used to things changing. And the deadline for implementation was something like 2000. I don't remember the exact details. 3 or 4 years before the deadline, there were no CFCs to be found in the electronics industry. They'd found solutions, they'd adopted them, industry-wide, they'd moved on. At that stage, the auto industry was going back to government saying, it's impossible to meet these requirements, we need an extension of the deadline. Same technical challenge, two very different responses. You have industries that thrive on innovation and rapid change. You have, you know, the lifetime of a platform in the automotive industry is 7 to 10 years. That's their cycle time. And they're not used to rapid change. How many hydrogen cars are there out there right now? How long have you been hearing about fuel cell cars? I've been hearing about that ever since I was a chemist in graduate school in the 70s. Okay? Hasn't happened yet. So the market risk, it's really the nature of the marketplace that you're in. And that varies from invention to invention. And execution risk, what's the vision, the leadership capabilities, and now you get into some soft things about skills, leadership skills. Can you motivate a team? And what's your role? Again, this is something you need to think. Are you bound and determined that you will be the CEO of this company, and you will be the spokesperson, and you will lead it? Or do you say, I will build the product, and then I will hire someone in to run the company and sell the product, and I'm happy to be the chief technology officer or chief science officer and evolve the technology, because that's what I'm good at, that's what I like doing. I don't want someone else to worry about docking with the investors. You got investors, you have to report to them, and you know, in the first year you can come in your lab coat and say, here's my lab results, it's really cool. After a couple of years, yeah, that's nice, but where are we in the sales cycle? Those tend to be uncomfortable meetings. Maybe you want someone else doing that. So what's your vision of your role? And an investor looking at you saying, you can't lead this company. They will look at you and say, you're very bright, but I don't think you're the person who will ultimately lead this company. They may just politely back away and not say that to you. So need to get clear what you're good at and what you want to do. And I'm going to leave you with one last slide, and I'm stealing a bit of thunder from AJ Agrawal, who's going to give you a lecture on business models. But it's a question, as I said, where do you fit in the ecosystem? And it's not just what do you do, but what do you enable? Now, what do I mean by that? Okay, let's say you've got a company, and I'm stealing AJ's example, and so you'll hear a much better example of this, but you've got a company that can do non-destructive testing of peer pilings, okay? It's got an instrument to do that, that's patented. So what's their business model? Simple one is, we make the instrument, costs us $5,000, we'll sell it for $10,000, we'll make $5,000 every instrument that we sell. And there's all sorts of customers that the Navy in the States or in Canada, or ferry terminals that have whole acres of pier pilings that rot, and so you need to test their viability. Okay, that's one business model. You sell an instrument. But the way they test these things, they typically test 99 of them with just a touch and feel, and maybe 1 out of every 100. Currently, they do destructive testing. They drill a hole in it, and they look at that core sample, and they look for signs of degradation. Well, you've now put a hole in the middle of your pier piling, and water gets into it and can rot it. So it is destructive testing. So you say, mine's a non-destructive test. I put my instrument against it, I get the same information. Okay, so you could sell instruments. Why not say, you know what? I'm not going to sell you the instrument. I'll sell you my services. And not only will I will test all of them for you. The 99 that it's just simply knock on it and see, you know, does it sound good? And that 1 out of 100. But in order to get my non-destructive patented test, you have to give me the whole job. So now I've maybe got a $50,000 contract, not a $10,000 sale. That's just by changing my business model. It all depends on my core technology. But as a business person, it's what have I enabled? And on how much money is on the table. I could take that one step further. Do all this testing. Someone's got to replace the ones that need replacing. So maybe I have a division that gets in there as a contractor and does the replacement. Now that's a long distance from developing instruments, but now I've maybe got a $500,000 contract. So, you know, rather than saying, whoopee, I made $5,000 by selling my instrument, what was on the table that you enabled, that you could get access to because of your smart technology? That's a business model. Now AJ will give you more details about that example. I'm going to have to apologize because I'm stealing his thunder. I have another good example, but it's a company that we're working with in Mars, and I can't disclose it because of confidentiality. But there are lots of other examples of companies when you say, I know what you think you're doing, but let's step back and say, how much money can we make off of this? And sometimes the simple answer is, hey, I make widgets, I sell widgets. And you get too far extreme, then you say, I don't want to be a contracting company, for God's sakes. I'm an electronics engineer. That's too far out, and you know, you've all heard the saying, stick to the knitting. So your business model, you have to be sensible, but think big. Don't just say, I've got a neat thing to do widgets. Think about a bigger business opportunity. And I'm going to close on that note. Happy to answer any questions, either to the group as a whole or one-on-one afterwards. So thanks.